All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something, kind of different. We have a personal diary entry. It's from April 6th, 2025, and it's written by someone named Rodri. And so it's not like a news report or an academic study or something like that, but it's a personal reflection on this idea of following, divine guidance, like God's guidance and order in life.
Yeah, and what's really cool about this entry is that Rodri, he's grounding all these personal thoughts of his on this passage from the Bible, Numbers chapter 10, verses 11 through 36. So it's like we get to see like a modern person's perspective on this ancient text.
Yeah, exactly. And so for you, the learner, listening in today, our mission is to sort of dig into those core ideas that are coming out of Rodri's thinking here, and hopefully uncover some insights, about moving forward with purpose and that significance of structure, or maybe even, you could say like a divine order, like in your own life's journey. So whether you're, at a crossroads right now, or you're beginning something new, starting a new project, or just, looking for some more clarity in your life, I think Rodri's his exploration of this passage is going to have some surprisingly relevant things to say to you.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
Oh, let's do it.
All right. So the entry starts by, zeroing in on this significant moment in the biblical narrative. It's the departure of the Israelites from Mount Sinai, right?
Right.
And Rodri notes that this happened on the 20th day of the second month of the second year after they had left Egypt.
Yeah, so I mean, think about that for a second, right? They spent nearly a whole year at Mount Sinai. They were there getting instructions from God, like figuring out how to function as a community.
Really establishing themselves.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So Rodri looks at this leaving of Sinai as this huge turning point, right? He calls it a real first step forward.
I like that.
It's that moment when you go from preparing, like getting everything ready, getting your ducks in a row to actually taking action. And that really gets you thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like in your own life, you spend time, learning stuff, planning things, maybe even overthinking some things, right? But what's it like when you finally shift gears? When you go from just getting ready to actually doing the thing, putting that preparation into practice.
It's huge, right? I mean, I think we've all felt that in our own lives. And what's interesting here is that this departure, it wasn't just like a mad rush. The Bible is really clear about that. It emphasizes that the Israelites moved by stages.
By stages. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the key thing here is that a cloud, which they saw as like a visible sign of God's presence, it was guiding them, showing them where to stop and set up camp.
Oh, wow.
So these stops weren't just random, they were like these significant waypoints on this huge journey they were undertaking.
Milestones.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and Rodri, he takes that and he connects it right to our own lives.
Oh, interesting.
He says that, our lives, just like that journey of the Israelites, they have these life stops, these turning points that, they might not just be coincidence.
Yeah.
Maybe they're part of something bigger. Even a divine plan.
A divine plan. Wow. That's pretty powerful stuff to think about. I mean, think about the big turning points in your life.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like those moments were more than just chance?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Rodri gets into the specifics of how the Israelites were actually organized for this whole journey, right?
Okay.
It wasn't just, a massive crowd just wandering through the desert. The tribe of Judah, along with Issachar and Zebulun, they led the first division, all marching under their own banner.
Okay.
Right. So you see the sense of leadership and structure right from the beginning. Think of it like a well-organized project team, right?
Yeah, I get you.
With different departments moving in a specific order to achieve a really complex goal.
Each part has its role, its timing, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
And here's a fascinating detail. Before the second group even started moving, the tabernacle, that portable place of worship, it was taken apart.
No.
And Rodri, he points out that the Gershonites and Merarites, they had this specific job of carrying the structural parts, like the curtains, the frames, all that stuff, so that it could be put back together really quickly once they got to the next campsite.
Oh, I see.
So it was all about efficiency and being prepared.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and then right behind them in that second division were the Kohathites.
Okay.
And they had this incredibly important task. They were the ones carrying the sacred objects, like the Ark of the Covenant and the other holy items.
Wow.
Yeah. And Rodri really emphasizes that That order, that specific order of how they moved, it served a real purpose. It meant that God's presence, represented by those objects, could be like reestablished quickly at the new site.
Well, yeah.
And it also meant that those sacred items were handled with so much care and reverence. You know, they were protected.
Yeah.
It shows this really meticulous approach to everything.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so then you had the second division itself, led by the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. After them came the third division with Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. And finally, bringing up the rear, like the rear guard, was the division of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali.
Oh, so it was like a tiered formation.
Very deliberate, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so, I mean, the level of organization here is just incredible, right?
Absolutely. The Israelites moved in this specific order. They were commanded to do it this way, showing just real discipline and obedience. And Rodri's right, you know. He says that orderliness, it was absolutely crucial to preventing chaos during this massive undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if they had just all set off with no plan.
Right, it would have been a disaster. Right.
Total chaos.
Exactly. And it makes you think about the structures that you have in your own life, right? Whether it's how you organize your day, how you tackle a big project, even how you manage your household, like how intentional are you about the steps you take and who does what, you know?
Yeah, that really resonates. I mean, Rodri's point about preventing chaos, I think that's a big takeaway for the learner here. Like when we feel overwhelmed by something, a task or a situation,
Yeah.
it's often because there's no clear order or the process breaks down, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So much to learn just from how they organize this journey.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit here. Rodri, he goes on to point out this interesting detail about Moses inviting his brother-in-law, Hobab, to join them on the journey.
Oh, yeah, Hobab. Right. And Hobab, he was a Midianite, so he knew that desert terrain like the back of his hand.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the significance of that?
Well, Rodri sees this as a really important point. He's saying that, yes, they had that guiding cloud showing them the overall direction they needed to go in, but Hobab's practical knowledge, it was essential for dealing with the day-to-day stuff.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Like, he knew where to find water, where there was good grazing land for their animals, how to navigate the actual physical challenges of the desert.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even when you have a clear vision, the nitty-gritty details, they matter.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you can have the big picture, but you still need to figure out how to make it work in practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this shows us something really beautiful, I think.
Yeah.
It shows us that divine guidance, that big picture guidance,
Yeah.
and practical human help, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right, yeah.
Roger was saying they work together.
Okay.
You can have a strong sense of where you're ultimately going, your cloud pointing you in the right direction, but you also need the Hobabs in your life.
Yeah.
Those people with the specific skills, the experience, the knowledge of how things work on the ground to help you navigate the practical realities of getting there.
That's so important, right? I mean, for the learner, this is a huge takeaway. When you're working towards a big goal, are you just focused on that inspirational why?
Or are you actually seeking out the support, the practical knowledge of people who can guide you through the details, the how-tos, all of that?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so next, Roger returns his attention to the role of the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
And he points out that it would actually travel ahead of the Israelites, like by a 3-day journey.
Wow.
So it was scouting out a resting place for them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and Rodri, he interprets this as this powerful symbol. It's like a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ leading the way for believers today.
Oh, okay.
You know, the ark in this story, it represents God's presence, God's covenant with Israel. And for Christians, that foreshadows Jesus, who they believe is God with them, the leader of their faith.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so the ark is going ahead, and then what?
Well, then Rodri, he talks about these specific prayers that Moses would offer in relation to the ark's movement.
Okay, so different prayers depending on whether the ark was moving or stopped.
Exactly.
Okay.
When the ark would move forward, Moses would pray, "Arise, Lord. May your enemies be scattered. May your foes flee before you."
Yeah.
And Rodri, he explains this as like a calling on God's power to overcome any obstacles, any opposition as they were moving forward.
Yep.
And then when the ark would stop, when they would set up camp, Moses would pray, "Return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel."
Oh, wow.
And that was this plea for God's continued presence, his care, that provision of rest and rejuvenation after they'd been traveling and working. So it's like this ongoing conversation with God,
Yeah.
they're tuned in to the different phases of their journey.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So what Rodri's really emphasizing here is how important it is to be aware of God's leading, which is symbolized by the ark in this story, and then to actively engage with that through prayer.
So it's not just passively following.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
You're participating, you're talking to God, you're asking for his help, his guidance. And that raises a really important question for you, the learner.
Okay.
What's your arc?
Yeah.
What's that central guiding principle in your life? It might be your core values, your deepest beliefs, your sense of purpose, whatever it is.
Yeah, good question.
And then how do you actively engage with that principle? Both when you're moving forward and when you need to stop and rest and regroup.
Really good question. Wow. Okay, so as Rodri's getting towards the end of his reflection here, he starts to connect this ancient journey, this story of the Israelites with the experiences of believers today.
Right.
He says that we're all navigating a kind of wilderness in our lives.
Yeah. We all face challenges, uncertainty, it's part of life.
Yeah, totally.
And he points out that there are these internal struggles, our own doubts and fears.
Yeah.
And then there are these external distractions, these worldly things that can pull us off course.
Oh, yeah.
And all of that, it can disrupt the order that we're trying to create in our lives. And it can slow us down, keep us from reaching our goals, both personally and spiritually. It's that constant tension between the path we want to be on and the reality of what we're facing every day.
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the takeaway then? What's he saying we should do?
Well, as Rodri understands it from this passage, the message is to approach our lives with that same intentionality that the Israelites had when they were following the ark.
Okay.
Taking things step by step, stage by stage, trusting in that guiding presence, even when things get tough.
Yeah, like don't try to do everything at once. Be patient and trust the process.
Exactly.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah, and then Roger gets really personal here. He connects these insights to something he's doing in his own life. He's got these online gatherings coming up focused on discipleship.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And he's framing these gatherings as a structured journey, a journey of learning and growth that requires order and intentionality to really make progress.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's committed to guiding others through this structured approach. And he's putting his trust in God even when things get difficult, which, they inevitably do.
Yeah, of course.
So it's a great example of how he's taking these ancient principles and applying them to his life today.
That's cool. I really like that he's sharing his personal experience. Makes it so much more relatable.
Totally. Okay, so to wrap up our deep dive into Rodri's diary here, we've talked about the importance of knowing when it's time to move forward after you've spent time preparing.
Right, yeah.
And we saw how the Israelites, how they were so organized, and that highlighted the importance of structure in achieving your goals and avoiding chaos.
Yeah, and not being afraid to ask for help, to get practical advice from people who know their stuff.
Exactly, like Hobab.
Like Hobab, yeah.
And then finally, that whole story of the ark and the prayers that Moses prayed, it showed us how important it is to stay connected to our guiding principles, to be intentional, to take action, but also to reflect and ask for guidance.
Yeah, and to pray,
Yeah.
Not to just passively go through the motions, but to actively engage with God or with whatever that guiding force is in your life.
Absolutely.
So the learner, as we finish up here, I want to leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
Rodri's reflection, it really emphasizes the power of prayer,
Yeah.
and that intentional connection with our guiding principles.
Yeah.
And it's important in both the good times when things are moving forward and in the tough times when you need to rest and recover. So as you think about your own journey, your own arc, what would happen if you were more deliberate about that connection? More intentional about engaging with that guiding force in your life? What obstacles might be removed? What kind of peace and purpose might you discover in the process? I think it's something worth exploring.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, keep diving deep, everyone.
Yeah, keep learning.